So, what was the last outing that you remember before lockdowns in the US began taking place back in March?
So the last thing I remember, I was actually so the last outing before the lockdowns.
Yeah.
Okay, so my daughter was born on February 15th, and the last outing I remember going on, it was a week after she was born because she was in the NICU for a week.
Mhm.
And my wife and I went to First Watch, and that was our first family outing. Was our last outing before lockdowns really began to take place because having a newborn, were very very busy after she was born. Uh, so that was the last thing that I remember. But before that, it was probably just at Bob's Bar with my friends. A lot of social stuff.
I'm in the state of Florida. So our lockdowns largely started, at least within our city, started mid-March, pretty much. We went out for my wife's birthday at the end of February.
Nice. And so was that outing, was it in a really crowded place? Like, was
Yeah.
there any concern in your mind about, oh, maybe we shouldn't be too close to people? But I mean, probably not. But
No, there was no real consideration of any of that. We went out to a bar, met up with some friends.
It's actually really clear. I was pregnant at the time. I had an OBGYN appointment that morning and I talked to my doctor. I told her, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with COVID. We don't know how it affects pregnant women or unborn babies or anything like that. So I don't want to go to work anymore. And I'm really uncomfortable. What do you think? Is there anything we can do? And she immediately wrote me an excuse letter. She had the same concerns that I did. So I went to work. I told my boss, like, hey, I can't work anymore. Like, I need to take a leave of absence. And that was it. That was the last time I went out.
wow.
It was my mini honeymoon because we had just gotten married and anniversaries in 3 days. I remember. And we went to Amish country for just like 3 or 4 days. And that was kind of the start of things to come for 2020. The honeymoon went well, but almost every business was closed in Amish country because they were having their version of Christmas. So it was kind of disappointing in that way, but
Yeah.
it was still a lot of fun being there.
The last outing I remember, I went to see the movie Emma with my friend Chloe. Yes.
How was that? Do you have any concept of COVID or any feelings like about that at all at that time?
I remember at that moment in time, COVID really hadn't come to the US quite yet, or if it was here, it was only on the West Coast at that time. So we were all still living pretty normally with an understanding that it was probably going to affect us at some point in time, but we were still distanced enough from it to be like, meh, things are okay. Like there was some caution, about like touching things or being out in public, but it hadn't really impacted us quite yet.
Yeah. All right.
So I was actually at my parents'. We went out for like a walk and I was still living in Philly. So I remember coming back and then my parents were like, hey, the lockdown's happening. So I'm like getting ready to pack up and go to Philly. And they were really mad about it. They're like, you're not going anywhere. There's a lockdown. And I was like, no, I'm still going to go. And so like our last conversation was just my parents and I like getting into an argument because they were really concerned about me going back to Philly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Aside from grocery runs, going to work and school and stuff like that, probably a family visit. I think it was for oh man, I don't know if Jason's grandma turned 100 this past January or if it was the year before that. But like, I think, I don't know. I apologize for that. But it was a family visit. And I think it was late January, early February, something like that. So, yeah.
So the last one I would actually remember is probably the day I went out and did my marathon. Was one of the last days I remember like going out and like not worrying about it. It was right on the peak of when people started talking about lockdowns were going to happen, right towards the beginning, middle of March, when it was on the verge of it. We weren't quite there yet. You know, I think at that point we saw this fantasy of, oh, well, that won't happen to our area. So I think that was one of the last days I actually remember like being out and not like fully masked or being told that we have to stay home.
Well, it should be an easy one because it was actually the weekend for me specifically when I wasn't going back to work. We were on our anniversary weekend, Cincinnati. So
Nice.
like we had gotten there a day. I remember because it's the shutdown started in Cleveland, then Columbus, and Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt weird because we were like running away from this thing happening, like real Walking Dead type of like.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because it's like a college town, but colleges had just like were done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had like picked everyone off campus. So like all these students were like hauling their like mattresses out of the door.
Yeah.
Oh, this is like a thing. And I remember we were like sitting in an Indian restaurant eating dinner, and they had like 5 TVs on, and all of them, they were all talking about COVID. Yeah. And I was like, oh man. Oh, this is a thing. So that was kind of like the big like week. I guess it was like, wasn't a weekend. Was it a weekend? Oh, whatever. The weekend before everything shut down, when it was like, yeah, that was pretty much the last thing. That was it.
Did you have a go-to hand washing song, or like what did you do when everyone was kind of posting, oh, this is my hand washing song?
Yeah. So for me, it was actually the opening of Star Trek. But I would say it. It's not a song. I suppose that I could have hummed the Next Generation theme song, but I decided to just say the captain's oath from Star Trek. Just a cause for exploration, and which was really just telling, I feel, of where we just currently were at the time. Like we were really just going into this whole new world, strange frontier. So it was actually just quite rather reflective 20 to 25 seconds every single time, after I would say that. At work, I actually almost put it up on the bathroom wall so that they also could have a very contemplative moment.
So I was leaning very heavily on the Team Rocket like saying, to protect the world from devastation. All that.
Nice. Now, do you still think a song in your head when you're washing hands, or?
No. I've almost completely forgotten all about all of that. But that's a good question. Probably should still be.
I used like 2 rounds of Happy Birthday a couple of times, but most of the time I just counted, which I kind of tend to involuntarily find myself counting different things throughout the day. So it was pretty easy just to, all right, I gotta do this for 20 seconds. Like, let's go.
Nice. What was it?
I actually did not. I just made sure I put the water at a proper temperature and made sure to wash my hands a good length of time. But just make sure my hand was covered and covered in soap and was rubbed down. But I did get a good laugh out of all the songs that everybody was washing their hands to.
Right.
I didn't have one. I think that's probably because I worked at a hospital and I was like washing my hands so much that I'm like, I don't have time for that.
That makes sense.
Don't think, just wash.
Not really. I always wash my hands anyway. So I felt like I didn't need to do that. So I didn't have like a song or anything. But I was very much more conscious about what I was touching.
Right.
So like that was in my mind all the time.
Okay.
I didn't actually have a song. I was fascinated by that video that went around with the doctor in the scrubs who showed like, you know, you do this and then you do this and you do this and all that. And so that was my go-to. You know, I was like, they do the whole thing with, I think it was ink or paint to demonstrate how, you know, dirty your hand is when you don't do this part and how, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I learned a new way to wash my hands. So it wasn't so much the song and all that. It was just being very thorough.
Yeah. Okay. What was it?
So our building principal, like when we were still somewhat in school, tried to like force the "Shake It Off" from Taylor Swift. And that's the only one that really sticks with me. Like I remember like seeing tons of videos, but for some reason, and I'll stop in the school. They're still taped to like the sinks at my school from like that week we thought we would go back. So we thought we would put hand washing salons all over the building because evidently high schoolers can't wash their hands. So I feel like that was just something that has stuck with me as we did all of it.
Gotcha.
Gosh. Did you have one?
Mine to get pumped for it was to the window. Oh
my God.
To the valve. Just like to like, all right. You know,
my God.
That was one that I
just like had in your hand.
yeah.
That's
No.
really funny.
That and on the opposite side was the candy. Who can make a sunrise? Looking in a sun. So it's like
Yeah.
like trying to stay positive. Got a pleasant one, and then like let's go.
Yeah. I don't know that I had one. I think I just counted, honestly. I was just like, all right, Claire, stand here until your hands are really, really clean.
Yeah, and I'll say it was really helpful. All the memes and pictures of it. I'll say though, the washing of like the pad of your thumb and stuff, that really like, you know what? I don't think I really did address that part of my hands. Yeah. And so that made me like, okay, let's get this hand washing done.
Right. So when these lockdowns and quarantines were coming out, what were some of the challenges that you were expecting to face?
So I was really expecting to face a lot of just existential dread of just experiencing isolation, which was tough. Even being in a house with a newborn and my wife, I knew that I would be that I would feel alone at times. You know, there's only so much that you can do before you realize that, wow, like even when you're in a home of two people, you can feel very, very just alone sometimes because there's nowhere else you can go. But I was afraid of that. But to be quite honest, what I was afraid of more than anything was running out of baby formula because our baby had just been born. And what was interesting is I had this feeling that I needed to go and buy a lot of stuff. Even though I knew that I didn't, I had enough. It was like I had this fear of I'm going to run out of this, or I'm going to go to the store and they're not going to have that. But it was just interesting at how much my thoughts weren't so much on what I needed, but what my daughter and my wife needed. Wanted to make sure that they had access to things.
We had like a little bit of foreshadowing within our kind of my work community because one of the collaborators we worked with went to China in December. And so when he came back, he had to like quarantine for a bit. And we were like, wow, it sure is crazy what's going on over there, huh? And so that was like end of January. And then By the time March kind of rolled around, there was starting to be a lot of news everywhere. It became pretty obvious that there was going to be lockdowns and there was going to be like businesses closing and whatnot. So I was proactive on my end, and just like I already like worked from home a couple days a week. So I wrote an email to my boss and was like, hey, I'm gonna work from home for a while unless you tell me I absolutely can't. And he pretty much was like, yeah, that's fine. I think he thought it was gonna be like 2 weeks.
We knew that for us personally, we wouldn't be able to have a lot of help when the baby was born. So again, we were prepared for that, but we knew we'd pretty much be on our own with a newborn. We also saw all of the stuff in the news about toilet paper shortages and, people not being able to find flour or other necessities. So we were prepared to struggle grocery shopping, things like that.
Yeah, so I definitely knew like it would be hard to find work. And I was actually like on an interview process. I was worried about that. And that's why I went back to Philly. So I was like, oh my gosh, they're not going to hire me because the lockdown happened. But mostly just I've lived by myself. So I was kind of like, oh, well, this is going to be fun. Like, I don't know how long it's going to be, but I'm going to be fine, Yeah. But that's not what ended up happening. But the other thing too, like my parents were in Virginia. So I was concerned, like they were really worried about going to the grocery store. So me being in Philly, I was like, well, what's going to happen with them? Even if we do Instacart or something like that, like you're still not away from getting an infection. So
finding toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Honestly, one of my biggest fears was being forced to return to the office before I felt it was safe. And the same for the kids, for them, being required to go into the school buildings. Possibly, we didn't know if we were going to be facing an income shortage and all that kind of stuff. So those were the big ones.
Yeah.
I think for me, because I'm a social worker, my immediate brain just went to like my clients. So I was just like, okay, what am I going to have to start dealing with, to help meet my clients' basic needs,
Yeah.
So I was like spending like all day long, like making these like resource lists for clients and spreadsheets. And like, I feel like me and like the agency I work for, everyone was like sending each other everything, like here are all the things that might possibly come up, and so have this ready in case your client needs. So I feel like I was way more focused on my clients than on myself.
Yeah. But for me, because I work at the library, so it's based on borrowing things and bringing them into your home. And not to mention at the fact that there are a lot of adults that forget that we are not a daycare. Mm-hmm, and so you'll have kids there for hours.
Did you go through those challenges, and like how did you face them? How did you get past them?
Yeah, so the week of the lockdown, I went and interviewed anyway, and they hired me, but I couldn't start until July. So I was stuck at home. They sent me like some training stuff to do, but I wasn't getting paid for it. So I couldn't get a job, and I was living by myself in Philly, having to pay rent, which sucked. And like I didn't come visit my parents until July, pretty much. Wow. So that was a long time. And thankfully I had friends in Virginia who were willing to go and drop groceries and food. And we had family who would do that for my parents. So they were stuck at the house too the whole time. And being by myself wasn't fun. The first week I slept a lot because I was really tired. So I was still doing school too. So it was just too much. But after the first week, I was like really tired of being by myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It was really scary leading up to the day that she was born because I didn't know if my husband would be allowed to be there with me. We knew pretty early on that we would not be able to have any other visitors at the hospital. So we were able to adjust to that change in plans. Thankfully, we were not required to wear masks during delivery. I would have been willing to. At that point, the science on that was a little bit fuzzy. The CDC hadn't like 100% made mask guidelines yet.
Right.
This was the end of April. But all of the medical professionals wore masks. They were very careful. We felt really safe the whole time. The only kind of hiccup was my husband tried to get food while I was in labor, and he thought he was allowed to leave the hospital and come back, but they changed the rules like between the time we got there for my induction and that evening when he left to get food. So there was a little bit of an issue with his delivery driver and things like that, just figuring out how he could feed himself in the middle of the night. But otherwise, we felt, pretty safe and pretty prepared for what things would be like while we were there.
But in terms of what I knew I would face, or what I expected to face, was loneliness and isolation. That one right there, I don't feel like I've really even gotten out of, because I really miss my friends. I really miss my family. Normally this time of year, I've gone to several anime conventions. I would be getting ready for another one. I would go to the Arnold with my friends, or I go to Beer Fest. I was doing all these things, and all of these things that I would normally get to do, I'm not able to do. And things like Zoom were really, really cool. And this is cool, but things like Zoom were really, really cool when we first just started, but it really didn't help with the need for human connection and contact. Definitely. that I just lost. We all just lost it. And I've had a lot of my OCD symptoms have been heightened. A lot of just depression and anxiety has really started to surface up. I was actually saying to Becca the other night, I had just put Catherine down, and I just love this baby girl so much. And I said to Rebecca, I said, I do not understand how I can be so incredibly happy and content and so depressed at the same time. And that's what I've been experiencing in my own life. Is I have a lovely wife, I have a beautiful daughter, and I'm so happy, but still knowing that I'm experiencing this disconnection from my friends and extended family. It's just been really, really hard.
For me, I think it was establishing those bubbles.
Yeah.
And it's like, so yeah, that was it. But refining the bubble and like knowing when to be like, okay, we're going to take a break because you've done something or I've done something, where it's like possible exposure. So let's just wait 2 weeks and then chill out. Right. And just stuff like that. And so it was knowing what it looks like to be responsible, but still having grace with like, okay, there are needs of social interaction that I have, and just being healthy,
right,
mentally and physically.
So did you learn any new skills or hobbies during this year? Maybe like especially that first good chunk of time that most of the United States was in lockdown?
Yeah, I did not. Since I was at work, it was like I was locked down with nothing to do. And I did have my computer. I was able to get my computer from work, and like the first week I was on my computer working from home, so I didn't have like tons of just spare time to do nothing, or learn something new. But yeah, towards the end of the year, I did learn. I put up a darkroom for my photography and was practicing making prints from film. And so that was fun. That was something I've been wanting to do for the last year or two. So it's kind of cool to finally get to do that.
I did. I learned how to skateboard.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Teach yourself or? You know, did you have a go-to YouTuber or something? Or...
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Like everyone else, I learned everything on YouTube, which is probably bad because like you're watching all of the super cool tricks and stuff and you're like, I'm gonna do that.
Right.
And then when you go out and do it, you're like, I can't do that. It was fun.
Okay.
Cooking. I think I love cooking anyway, but I picked up on cooking a lot more because the first couple weeks I kept ordering out because again I was scared to go to the grocery, but it doesn't make sense. I was making an excuse to eat out most of the time, but then I was like, this is not financially viable. I can't do this without a job. So I just started cooking and I really enjoyed doing that. I picked up on some art that I hadn't done since I think the last time I did any kind of art was in college.
Okay. Before COVID, I did a lot of training for different races and things like that. But one hobby I picked up is there's a group down here called F3, which is stands for Fitness, Fellowship, and Faith. And it's a men's-based program where they get together every morning at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. to work out together and do things like that. So that's something I picked up pretty early on just to get me out of the house. Because we formed what we called our F3 bubble, where it was just the same guys every single day. So we knew that we could track there, which has led me to a lot of new ways of exercising and getting out of the house.
I got really into Animal Crossing. So that was like my jam for like that whole springtime. I was just like constantly playing Animal Crossing.
Yeah. She learned how to do that coffee thing with the like instant coffee.
Oh, whatever that was called.
She did
that whipped coffee thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't really that great.
Look, she did so many things.
Yeah.
Every trend that was going on, she at least tried it out.
I did.
Like, all right, is this cool or is it not?
You practice a lot of like animation stuff. He's an animator, so he did a lot of like working on different art stuff during quarantine.
Yeah, I'll say the stuff that I picked up happened a little bit later on, as opposed to like instant new skills. I just took a lot of time to dive into making stuff. Oh, music!
I think the biggest like foreign dream I had was to work out a lot more, and I didn't do that at all. Like I was biking to work on the days I did go in, so that was like 3 days a week, and it was about an hour bike ride there and each way. So I was like, all right, that is exactly the time I need to work out. I can get all my working out done in what would have been my commute. And instead, I'm either like sleeping in or I don't know what. But I've not had the motivation to get up at 6 like I would before.
Yeah, I guess like working out. Like I was like, yeah, well, there's nothing else to do. But that didn't happen at all. Yeah. I think, I was kind of like, yeah, I could work out, be fit. And like, I think I worked out for maybe like 3 weeks, and then
that's more than I did.
I was hoping to read more. I did. I think early on I spent more time just staring at the television screen, like just watching just the constant feedback of all the same. So I feel like I wish I would have read more so I could have learned a little bit more about different things. Being in education, we're always doing our own type of personal growth and research and professional development. And I feel like I did, finish 3 or 4 books. I feel like I could have done more.
One thing that I wanted to add on was creating a 3D model, like a vinyl toy. Mm-hmm. Now
you did that.
No, I didn't. I just made a head right now. Like I started the idea, but like I draw on the regular, so character design isn't anything new. Mm-hmm. But bringing it to the 3D world where it like can be a toy, that's something that I haven't gotten a chance to do. Now, recently, there has been a start of that, which is really exciting, but it's just a very different way than I initially thought it was going to be.
I guess I started like roller skating, and in my mind, I was going to be like a really good roller skater, and I am not. Like, and I didn't take a lot of time. Like I bought the skates and I skated like twice, but then I kind of was just like, this is hard. My legs hurt.
Who was in your bubble, or who is in your bubble?
So I went home around the 29th of March or so, about the 25th, 29th or so is when I went back home, and I was no longer working in the office. And for that first month, it was just us. And then we had friends meet us in our garage. So in terms of like a bubble that we had, the way it hits me is I have to include my friends Ben and Kara. But even when we had them over, we wore masks and we were on like two ends of the garage. Like they brought us condado one night. He was even like funny, like he grabbed one of my like shovels and put my condado on the shovel and hoisted it over so that we could stay apart. But our bubble really has just stayed, with only just a couple of friends here and there. We've only even when we had people over, it's only been outside. But that's only, I'd say you can count the number of times that we've actually done that on one hand.
Wow.
We had one other couple friends that we had early on just decided and sworn to bubbledom. And that was pretty much it, especially for the first few months. I think there was like maybe 2 or 3 other people that we saw like once during that time. But yeah.
Okay. And those first couple of people, how regular would you say that you were like involved in each other's bubbles? Was it like once a day, every couple days, once a week?
Probably like a couple times a week.
Okay.
Sure. Initially, it was just my husband, my baby, and me. Once she was born, then my sister was able to get tested and quarantined so that she could come and stay with us when I had to go back to work. But it took several months before we loosened our restrictions for our daughter's grandparents. And even then, there are still a lot of rules in place about when we are or are not comfortable visiting with them and what kinds of precautions we need to take.
Definitely.
So there was a period of time I really wasn't seeing anyone. So I was just by myself. And because I lived by myself, it was just me. And then when things started to look a little bit better, there was like a brief moment of time in like July or June where we thought things were getting better. I started spending time with my friends Claire and Austin and Smith. And so it was just like the 4 of us that would spend time together sometimes.
Nice. Question I didn't prepare you for, but how do you feel, or how did you feel when you were kind of isolated, living by yourself, not having day-to-day interactions?
Well, I think it was hard because I was still going to work every day. I was still interacting with people, but it wasn't the kind of interactions that are like life-giving or enjoyable. It was stressful and hard. So I was like getting all of the negative aspects of social interaction and none of the positive stuff. So it was hard for sure.
Yeah.
So sadly, that is one of the things that I have been disappointed about with our experience. It's only been the 5 of us in our house. I regret, although regret's not the right word, because to me that means I have a little bit of control over it, but right. I didn't feel I had control over this. I regret that we didn't have a bubble so that the kids had other people and so that we had other people, just to interact with. Too many of our family members couldn't because of their job exposure and, things that they had no control over.
Right.
But there are also family members that wouldn't. We weren't able to trust them to be careful. They didn't take health risks very seriously. And both of the adults, my husband and I, in this house are high risk.
Yeah.
And, we felt an obligation to be careful for our kids' sake, because it would be irresponsible for us to put our children in a situation when we didn't have to,
Yeah.
where they lost one or both parents, and I'm the only source of income. And so, yeah.
So for me, I in a way we kind of had a couple mini bubbles depending on the situation, but everyone knew who was in the other bubble so that we could keep tracking. So for me, I had, like I said, like my workout buddies. There's about 6 of us who, we knew what we always did us, and then we knew that when we left, we were going home. Right before COVID started in the lockdown, I hired at Starbucks. As it was going to be a potential fun summer job, not thinking that this was all going to happen. So I did have like my Starbucks pod. We were work with the same people every single day for better tracking.
Right.
But besides those, the only other one I had was a church pod. So I think in the end, it was about the same 10 people between, working out and the tech stuff. But we really didn't have any motivation to get out. We wanted to stay in and stay safe.
But how did your job change due to the pandemic? And was it for the better or for worse? What would you say about that?
So I got a lot busier. Just being in just community outreach and healthcare, my first thought was, wow, I'm not going to have much to do. But it turned out that with how everything was just changing constantly, with what do you communicate it, how do you communicate it, what are the symptoms for COVID-19, what do you include, what do you not include, it really actually got really, really stressful. So I'm in outreach and engagement. So my role is really just grassroots, just community outreach and marketing for a federally qualified health center. So we have been really on the forefront of COVID-19 testing, and also just assisting the homeless who are in need of shelter during this time.
Gotten to talk to different people at work more. Because we've been because now the primary mode of conversation is like through like chat, like through the work chat system. So people who don't super engage with that feature don't talk to me very much, and people who do, I talk to all the time. And so like that's kind of thing where like the medium partially determines kind of who you're talking to.
So you've mentioned you've worked at a hospital. How did your job change due to the pandemic, and was it better or worse?
Yeah, my job definitely changed, and I would say it was worse for sure. I think because hospitals in general just were not prepared for what was going to happen. It was a mess. So the way hospitals were trying to navigate COVID and keeping both like employees and patients safe, it moved very slowly, very, very slowly. And in my position, we have to be there. So there was a period of time of maybe 2 months where we had a rotation of working from home. So I would work from home for 2 weeks and then go back into the hospital for 2 weeks. But that only lasted 2 months. The rest of the time I was physically at the hospital. And because we have like a really high volume of people that were coming into our clinic, we're still really, really busy. But we weren't even able to like talk with patients or really interact with them. So we were still getting all of the brunt of the work. Like there's still a ton of work to do, but none of like the moments of joy, like being able to connect with people. Because hospitals also have visitor policies, people are really angry and like stressed out. So it was a lot. It was a lot to handle, and it was super stressful, and I did not have a good time.
It's better in the sense that my hours are better due to having no commute. I can do 99% of my job from home, and the few things that I haven't been able to have been handled by others. So on my end, I mean, I don't know what my boss or my coworkers would say, but on my end, it's been better. I'm not looking forward to going back in person. I know now what it's like to work from home, and I prefer it.
In a weird way, it's kind of both better and worse. So last time I saw my physical classroom was March 13th. It's weird, some of the dates that you remember. We were going to spring break expecting a elongated spring break and then be back after.
Right.
The nice part is more flexibility. I'm able to do a lot more in a way, creatively with how I produce my classes.
Yeah.
But it just takes so much longer. To grade, many of my students don't turn their cameras on during our live lectures. So then I build a lot of student interaction and student relationships. And now I'm staring at dots for an hour and a half, which makes my job a lot more difficult. But the perk is it's safer. Like, we're not worried about, our building holds 800 kids. So we're able to have more control over our environment, which is nice. But I think if I have to like choose a balance, I definitely say it's harder.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Maybe March 20th or something. They were like, yeah, pack up your stuff. We're going to send you guys home. Probably just for like 2 weeks. Yeah. And then his has been kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it's been wild. So the first thing that happened was we did the immediate shutdown. And so at first we ended up being furloughed. And so it was a little bit of a stressful situation because, you know, I had never dealt with unemployment, never done anything like that. And so it was just a very hard adjustment. A lot of like, you know, unfortunately this delves into misogyny and the patriarchy, but like me as like, we just celebrated our anniversary and then boom, I'm not bringing anything home. And you know, the inadequacies of being a husband, being a man.
All right, switching gears here. What did you spend your stimulus check on?
Wow. That's
You can be as vague or as specific as you want.
I'll just, well, I can't really say this without it sounding weird. I bought an exercise bike because I just wanted to spend more time at home, and I knew that was a really easy way to do it. Now that's not what I spent it all on. I actually was able to save a portion of it as well.
I think what we did is we like either saved it or paid down debt.
My EMT class. I went straight to that. It was kind of like a blessing too, because I wanted to do this, and they really needed EMTs, especially right now. So I felt like that was something that I needed to do. So, but I didn't have any money. So I was like, oh, stimulus came in.
Bills, groceries, diapers, nothing exciting.
A Great Dane puppy. Yeah, my wife surprised me about the second weekend to COVID, the shutdown, with a Great Dane puppy. And so my money, that stimulus money, went more towards buying the crate and all the beginnings of getting a puppy and stuff like that. So some of the money on supporting the local businesses, especially like the restaurants and stuff.
What would you say was the longest amount of time that you spent at home or like on your designated property? No walks, no grocery runs. What do you think?
About a month and a half.
Oof.
I did not talk to anybody. It was pretty depressing now that I think about it. I think it was more concerned because I kept thinking, okay, if I have to go to Virginia for some reason, between the time that I got the job and I started actually working, I was like, I want to make sure I'm safe. So I didn't talk, like, I mean, we would FaceTime, but I never actually left my apartment for about a month and a half. Yeah.
Wow.
It probably wasn't much more than like a week, because somebody still has to go get groceries. And does taking out the trash count? If it's taking out the trash counts, because I do have to walk all the way to the edge of our apartment building complex. In that case, 0 days. But otherwise, if it's leaving the premises of the apartment building, then easily a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Okay.
Especially because, like, once you got that Uber Eats pass, it's hard to motivate yourself to get to the scary, deadly grocery store when you could just stay home.
My husband has done all of the grocery shopping pretty much since March, so I don't know when the last time I went to a grocery store was. I have chronic foot pain, so I also don't take a lot of walks unless I'm really feeling well. So there have probably been 2 to 3 weeks at a time where I just have not left my house.
So we started having our groceries delivered, so that eliminated that need to go out. Lately we haven't been able to go on walks a lot because of the weather, and it's so dark by the time I get off work. If we're talking about walking only, I think the longest stretch is a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking car trips, like if we have to go pick up a prescription from the pharmacy or something like that, maybe a month and a half.
Probably a week. You know, I one of the things is we just do weekly shopping trips. That's kind of how we do our groceries.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, early on, we would go weeks at a time. We would put all our errands on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So if we knew, like, oh, we need to go to the bank, we need to go to the grocery store, we need to get this, we'd just do it all on Saturday.
Yeah.
So that way it was only one day out. We knew where we were at. We could kind of, in a way, trace who we may come in contact with.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, I still had to leave pretty frequently for Starbucks.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I would say how often would we go, like, without leaving our house for fun? I mean, it was weeks.
No, it was like 2 weeks long. I didn't go anywhere. I was just here. And I didn't realize that was the case until, like, I don't know what made me realize it, but I had to, like, drive somewhere. Yeah. Okay. How about you?
Mine was just 3 days. I mean, like, I would like, you know, it wouldn't be
3 weeks, 3 days.
Yeah, look.
I'm an introvert.
And it's not like I went to any place or anything.
Right.
Like, I'm just gonna go out, because during the time I had gotten I'd like to just be outside. I was getting comfortable with running again, stuff, and I just needed to be outside.
All right. What were some moments of joy from 2020, whether you expected them or they're unexpected?
Yeah, there are a few things that happened that were really great. I mentioned earlier, like that period of time in June, July, where we thought things were getting better. My friends and I went to California, which now I'm like, that maybe wasn't the best decision, but we had all thought, you know, the numbers were getting better, things seemed to be looking up, so we thought it was safe, and all of us were safe. No one was impacted by COVID by that trip, but it was a really good time. Things were still closed, so we couldn't really go anywhere or do anything, but it was fun just to, like, have a change of pace. And then also at the end of 2020, I got a new job. So that was really exciting for me and unexpected for sure.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Animal Crossing, that was real fun. Multiple repeated playthroughs of Fire Emblem Three Houses on Nintendo Switch.
A couple of weeks, that's incorrect. About 2 months after I went back to work, after my daughter was born and the furlough was ended, I ended up quitting my job because we didn't have childcare. Our daycare had fallen through due to the pandemic and things like that. So I have stayed at home with her since then, and being able to be home to witness all of her milestones and My husband is also working from home, so being able to have that time together has been really special, because even though this year has been way more difficult than expected in a myriad of ways, it's been really nice to have that family time together that we would not have had otherwise. And speaking of family, my parents and siblings have been doing weekly Zoom calls every Sunday, so we've been able to see them and honestly probably communicate a lot more than we would have in an ordinary year, whatever that would have looked like.
Fourth day of 2020 was a great one, as I mentioned before, my wedding. And then we did end up getting to go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee for about a week, which was nice to just get away from responsibilities. And so that was good. And then I normally don't talk about money stuff, but somebody had gifted us some money to kind of do whatever we felt was necessary, or so they just kind of gave that to us and said, you can do whatever you want with it. We think you're the people who won't squander the money or use it unwisely. So we put that towards college debt, and that was a huge relief.
So the number one thing was the pride I have had in seeing how well our kids have handled everything. I mean, honestly, they have blown me away. Some other moments of joy: growing closer to my sisters through all of this. We message and dialogue a lot more since the shutdown than we did before. Being able to listen to my daughters practice their viola and their cello. I was never able to do that before. They would practice at school, or they would practice before I got home. And it's beautiful and it's peaceful and I love it.
Definitely one thing that was a joyful moment that was semi-unexpected was probably my Juneteenth cookout that I had. Yeah, so I at the time I was only hanging out with a lot of Claire's friends, friends that I was introduced through Claire. Let me be specific, because they're my friends. But and a lot of those were of they were white. They were white. Look, they were white though, and I love them. But I was coming to a place where I needed to be around Black people. I just needed that. And I wanted to throw a Juneteenth a celebration. And for those of you who don't know, I gotta plug this in. Juneteenth is in celebration of when the last slaves got delivered the information that they were freed, because it took a while from the emancipation to get all the way to Texas to know that they were free. So in celebration of that, that's what Juneteenth is. And so just being able to have a nice time where they pulled up, some hot dogs, some burgers, I made some cornbread. It was just a really enjoyable moment to be there with my people.
Probably another moment for me was my little sister got married, and it was just really simple and sweet. And so just seeing her finally be able to just have her moment and have her day, it was just really cool.
If you could send a one sentence message to yourself January 1st, 2020, what would you say?
You know what? It would probably be just something as simple as find the joy in what you can.
Stock up on toilet paper. I don't know.
Right.
I would say take all of your paid time off now while you can, and you can do hard things. Don't want to give too much away.
Right.
I don't know. It's just be prepared for change and prepared to get your plans ruined, and try to be okay with that.
I think I would just tell myself, keep keep leaving space for feelings. There's a lot happening, so.
I was gonna pretty much like, girl, you have no idea what's coming to you.
I would say invest in Zoom and Pfizer.
Yeah.
Maybe if it would be as simple as be prepared to support. And I kind of wish there's a lot of these topics that have been surfacing in our country for years, and I didn't start really reading it and digging into these issues until they're in the spotlight. And I wish I would have told myself earlier, like, start reading now because you're going to need it.
Finding joy within yourself in these moments, like take the time to learn more about yourself.
Okay.
Like I would have just told myself to document something every day. That would have been like, you are like living history right now, so document this.
This might tie kind of into that. What is one thing you've learned about yourself in 2020 that you want to remember?
That no matter how strong I think that I am still very vulnerable. And that I do need others around me to remain just intact.
I definitely I'm writing my thesis, and I definitely made like actual progress this year in a way that I didn't like last year really make anything serious. And so I think there is something to do with like feeling like I'm getting somewhere and that I can I might actually finish. And then also, this is my second year at my job. And I feel like this year was the year when I really felt like I was contributing something like specific and useful to the team. Whereas I feel like the first year was largely just like learning what all the things are to learn and then figuring out like what my major tasks are. I feel like this year I had a lot more opportunities to contribute, both from things I had learned and also just from like ways in which my own temperament and way of doing business like was useful to kind of the cause. And so that was really good.
I believe that I am more capable and resilient than I thought that I was. Just through taking things one thing at a time and educating myself and being patient and doing my best to protect myself and my family, I have found a much greater reservoir of strength than I would have expected.
I think I've always known this, but it's solidified that I just need other people in my life to get by, to get through life, and just to remember that, like Mike Main said in one of his albums, if you want to make it in life, you just can't do it alone.
I mean, 2020 was such a hard year for everyone, I think. I think I learned a lot about like the importance of my wants and needs, and giving attention to that. Yeah, I think that's something I learned and I really want to remember and continue like focusing on.
Everybody deserves love, and so do you. I think when you're, again, like living by myself, I was very critical and not working. I'm very much, I get fueled by what I do. And I think a lot of us, we value ourselves with the amount of stuff we get to do. And when you're not doing anything, you're kind of like, crap, I'm not worth anything. And that's one of the things. And plus, like quitting school too, it doesn't feel great to tell people, not in school anymore because I didn't like it and it sucked. And it kind of makes you feel like you failed. Sure. And just being able to tell yourself, hey, like that doesn't, take your value. You're still a valuable person. You still deserve love. I think I learned a lot about boundaries, being able to set that for myself and with other people. Learning those were pretty good. So I want to keep, working on those things.
a person can be completely truthful while still being deceitful, even unintentionally, like you have no idea. If you're keeping silent about who you are and what you think because of fear of how others will judge you. A lot of people talk about, keeping the peace, maintaining unity and all that, and maybe keeping quiet keeps the peace, but it's a negative peace that doesn't actually do anyone any favors. It doesn't strengthen relationships. And I had not realized before this year how much fear had crept into my mindset and had started to influence how truthful that I felt I could be with people. But true peace requires that we have the courage to face and talk about what's broken first, not just smooth it over to make other people happy. And truly loving words speak the truth of harm that's been done so that healing can start. And so as long as I act and speak with love and kindness, then I need to accept how others respond to me, even if it's negative. And it's not an excuse to be rude. Like, I'm still responsible for my actions and my words.
Right.
But it's a decision to no longer live in fear.
Yeah. I like that.
Probably the ability to adapt. I've always felt I'm pretty good about that, but one of the biggest moments this year, I got a call from my principal the day before school was supposed to start and completely flipped the schedule I was supposed to be teaching.
Dealing with mental health issues myself and seeing people be there for me in those times, and then hearing them say, well, like, Austin, you've done blah, 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 so of course I'm going to be there for you. Like, I think that was like just relationships with other people and seeing like that I do a good job at that, because for a really long time I felt like I wasn't good at being a friend.
Yeah.
And so that was a really awesome thing to discover about myself. It's like you do care for people in a very strong, deep manner, and that's a beautiful thing and a space that you can hold for people. So yeah.
I'm like trying to figure out how to like put this into words. I mean, I guess probably like the bottom line of what I've learned is that my voice is important, and I do have things to say that are meaningful and important to get out there. I think like this year gave me a lot of space to sit with my stuff, and with the help of my therapist and my spiritual director and my community, just being able to like be challenged and to actually have time to like sit and reflect and think and grow. I think the biggest thing I've learned out of all of that is that I do have things to say, and it's okay for me to use my voice.
What is one thing you want to leave in 2020, never to think or talk about again? And this doesn't have to be about you, it can be about anything in the entire world.
Yeah, you know what?
Country.
One thing I wish I could leave, and never have to think about or talk about again, would be the debate surrounding mask wearing.
Just kind of want to, I don't know, I want to feel like moving forward. I want to feel like I'm not stuck anymore.
Our trip getting canceled, and then finding out that the airline that we bought our tickets through and who reimbursed us, they might be going into bankruptcy. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. So that's just been something that's weighed on my mind, and I've realized it, noticed it pop up in the back of my head quite a few times this, like in the past month or two, and it's just kind of gotten me down. And just not being able to do that, which was, traveling has become a huge, like I said, a huge part of my life, especially the international trips. So not being able to do that, and then not sure if we're going to be able to do it this year in 2021.
I mean, I think an obvious answer is like COVID. It was just like such a mess for everyone. There were a couple of like painful experiences that happened in 2020 for me as well that I really don't want to think about or talk about or like have to worry about ever again. Of course, none of that is reality. Like, we're going to have to continue thinking about COVID or whatever's happened in our lives. So I never really think about questions like that. But if it were possible, for sure, I'd leave those things behind.
Yeah.
Just all of 2020. I don't know. I think it would be good to remember, because I think I grew a lot. If anything, I grew a lot last year as a person. I feel more confident in who I am. And it's because of the crappy things that have happened. You know, I've had issues with people, like, again, like when I was saying, like with boundaries within myself, I knew I was being, you know, kind of stretching myself out a lot, being able to say no. So all of those things came out of me going through pretty crappy situations. So I don't think I want to forget any of them, but definitely painful memories for sure. Yeah. But
choose to leave behind. I think a lot of the things I've learned this year is the whole, you know, equity piece got really brought up this year. So I definitely think a lot of people would think about some like the bad things that have happened, you know, in our country, and I think I would keep that with me, because I think that's where we grew the most. If I had a choice to leave anything, I would love to, it might sound weird, but I'd love to leave my student debt. Like, if we could just leave that and just move forward.
I want to say the president, but I don't know if that's an acceptable answer.
Trump, the person, the name, the entity, all of it.
That orange turd, yo, man. I'm ready for him to be gone. I'm ready. For real. I mean, we're going to have to deal with stuff, the ramifications of that guy in the years to come. But I am ready to just have that, the microphone to be passed off to somebody else.
What relationships did you gain in 2020?
You know what is interesting is I probably got a lot closer to my brothers and sisters who I never see, and I haven't seen already just like a year or two, because we are all over the just country. I really feel like this might be just experiences that others have felt too, that with people that they never would have been in contact with, like every other day or every week or whatever, like we had like a texting chat, like we were talking, it's like I don't think I texted my brother more than once a week before, less than that even, maybe like once every 3 weeks before this year. But I've gotten a lot just closer to my family that lives in Florida and Oregon, and even just friends who I haven't seen since high school. I've just gotten closer to them because, and I really believe it's because of the shared experience on a global level.
With getting married, I gained, a wife and a sister-in-law and a brother-in-law and my mother and father-in-law. And unfortunately, my father-in-law passed away this year. Yeah. I don't know. I guess recently I started selling my prints through our antique store, one of our local antique store, and so I've met a couple of people there. But overall, it's just been mostly going to church and work. So haven't really made any new relationships?
Yeah.
I think, like, again, the people that I would spend my time with, like Ian, Shamira, we were already close while we were going to Pecan, but we definitely got closer. And I also gained EMT friends who were going through a whole bunch of stuff themselves, so being able to talk to them. But I think the biggest thing, my parents and I became closer too, because I had all these free time. And my parents had all this free time, so all we did was just FaceTime each other all the time. And then, I moved here to DC, so my friends in DC, my best friend Virginia, she is here, and so we hang out all the time. So I don't think I gained like new friendships, but I got to take a step forward with the relationships that I already had.
Definitely all of my workout friends. One of the cool things with those relationships is we don't go by our real names. We all kind of have, you tell bits of your life story when you first go and you get nicknamed. So I go by Texas Instruments because of the calculator and my math background. But what's really cool is since that started in March, I've done multiple races with these guys. Many of them are 10, 15 years older than me. Started really to invest on, hey, when you have kids, do this. And giving that advice and knowledge and being able to have some of those older friends is definitely nice. And it's really cool. I mean, I now have, 10, 15 new friends that if I wouldn't have gone into those workouts back in March, those relationships never would have happened.
Well, I would say I am wealthy in relationships right now. Like that's something that, as crazy as this year has been, I am so thankful for the relationships that I've built or the relationship that's gotten deeper. And so being able to have people consistently around where they were like, no, you're fine, be you, and not the you think we want you to be.
Right.
Actual you.
Yeah.
Which ended up helping me learn a lot about myself and my wants and my needs and just being a healthier person. Shoot, even some of my coworkers, like they were coworkers before, but now they are close friends, and that's a really beautiful thing.
Now turn the tables on that. What relationships did you lose this year?
I don't think that I lost any. And if I did, they obviously weren't that memorable because I don't know. But I think that I have grown apart from some people. And I saw an article the other day that was, with bars and sports not being an option, men are needing to find different ways of connecting. And at first I was like, oh, well, that's not true. But then I began to think about it. It's like, the people who I would go out and get whiskey with or smoke cigars with, we don't do that anymore. We still have a relationship. We still talk, but we've grown apart a little bit. This is the same group I would always go to movies with, and we're not doing that. We have grown apart, and I don't think that we really know. And this isn't just men, this is just people. Like if how you connected was going someplace and spending money someplace, how do you connect with someone when that's not there?
Kind of halfway through, not even like a third of the way through the lockdown period, our quarantine bubble friends moved out of state. And so we haven't really been able to keep up with them as much, whereas before we would see them all the time.
There has been a lot of deeper understanding of who people are, what they believe in, a lot of exposure of people's characters, both with how they've handled the pandemic, how they've responded to things happening in politics. And so there have been several people who didn't show up for us in the way we would have expected when our baby was born. and other people who we have kind of lost faith in by watching how they've reacted to things going on this year. So, various people from church and from previous churches we've attended, as well as some extended family members that we have needed to distance ourselves from because they don't seem like safe people anymore.
Some of the friendships I gained in 2020, I also lost, which I think stuff like that it's difficult and challenging, and you have to like grieve those losses in a way, but that is also just a part of like the movement you make through life. Some things don't last forever, and you can like enjoy what they were for the moment and then let them be what they are.
I think it was, I think there was this idea where if you're in a pandemic, you're not doing anything, you're quarantined, you should be able to contact everybody. I think there was this kind of like an expectation, like an unspoken expectation. And I wasn't able to do that. It wasn't good for my mental health. So there were a few people that, I just realized like I can't invest emotionally with. And, I just pretty much kind of weaned out from it. And it worked out for me and worked out for them too. So
I have had 4 cousins unfriend me. And as far as I can recall, none of them were because of direct conversations that we actually had. Like there was no attempt at dialogue.
What do you think is something that will never go back to the way it was before COVID?
I don't think we'll be blowing on birthday cake anymore. Rebecca said that she doesn't think that I'm like going bowling and like sticking your fingers in a ball and then walking over to your fries and
for sure no.
Yeah, like you're not going to be doing that. So yeah, but definitely blowing on birthday candles, I don't think it's going to be a thing anymore. Or if it is, I don't know. I know I actually like that we don't shake hands anymore. I like to shake hands. I love to hug, but it's just really interesting that it's like, I hope the new way to greet people is just like, oh, sorry. Like you don't know what to do. I hope that stays a thing, because I think that would be the coolest thing, like not knowing how to greet. Like, do you do that? Like, no. I actually don't think I have shook someone's hand since March. Like, that is bizarre. Like, I have done a fist bump. I've done the elbow. I've even done a little bow. But I believe that shaking hands will come back. That's too much a part of our culture.
Yeah.
To come back, but yeah.
Okay.
This is perhaps a controversial statement, but I don't think there's much. Like, I feel like things are pretty much going to go back largely to normal. I don't feel like we have like metabolized any of the lessons that were available to learn during this experience. Like, I feel like any lesson that could have been learned on any societal or personal level, like largely just was not learned. And so, and I don't know how many of them are like important, necessary lessons. There's like, I mean, we learned a lot of our neighbors do not care if they kill us, but we kind of knew that already. And like we like learned that masks can help prevent the spread of disease, but like kind of knew that already too, but like didn't actually think so. Like that would be what it would be. I would think would be like, oh, people wearing masks more, but I just feel like that's not going to happen. Like maybe at maybe at like 25% more people wear it sometimes, but I expect largely the first thing everyone is going to do as soon as the last lockdown ends is like go out, party, no masks, never wearing a mask, mask burnings publicly in the square. Like,
Yeah.
I think that the way we think about germs is probably going to linger for a long time, at least throughout our generation. I have thought many times about things I used to do, like get a can of pop from a vending machine, and that sounds horrifying to me now. So I don't think, I think at times there might be moments for handshakes and things like that, but I think we're going to see a lot more hand sanitizer, a lot more masks, and just more caution about seemingly everyday things that could transmit germs.
I mean, so many things have changed. I think this period of time in history and in the world is like a huge paradigm shift. In terms of like health and safety, I think a lot of the things we have in place now will be normalized, like mask wearing, possibly even social distancing to a degree. I think the way like retail places and grocery stores navigate like their interactions with people, I think will stay like kind of how they are now.
Yeah.
And I for sure think that people will continue working from home if that was something they were able to do. Partly just because a lot of companies, I think, saved money by sending people home. And sadly, I mean, most of the things we do in America anyway are based on profit. So so I think those are things that will stay the same. And because we know that we can do things virtually now, I mean, people are going to take advantage of that for sure and continue doing it, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this is personal, but I'm more of a germaphobe than I thought. And I'm really scared that once things calm down, like putting a mask on and like having hand sanitizer with me has been such a comfort. And I'm scared that once everything goes back to normal and people are not doing that anymore, I'm going to go crazy. Like I'm going to be that person who's going to let somebody and start immediately like hand sanitizing my hands.
So the thing in this question is you.
Yeah, I think
I'm going to go back to normal.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think work is going to be weird. I've been working from home, so I don't know what that's going to look like. But I know a few companies are already like planning on not, even having their, employees come back to the buildings because they can effectively do their job at home. So.
I hope handshakes. I feel like we can be much more creative than like shaking hands. Also, this puts more in your mindset of what people touch. Like we found it normal just to like shake hands. And I'm like, if you had a baby and you had a child, when was the last time you changed a diaper? I might have baby poop on my hands now. I think that'll be some of the way we interact that way. Also, when we're sick, how we interact. Maybe more people will start going with, masks when they're sick. But I think what will take the longest is anything with large gatherings.
Do you think 2020 has done enough to make it into history textbooks?
I believe so. But not even just because, yes, I do believe so, because when you see the sheer volume of just protesters this past summer, one of the largest ever organized marches that was nationwide, that went on for weeks. Like you look at Portland, those protests went on for weeks. Here in Columbus, where I live, I actually went to a couple of the protests, and the sheer volume of just people, I think that will definitely be remembered. Sadly, the names of the young men and women who were shot by police officers this year, that their names will be remembered. And I also believe that when we come back to evaluate this pandemic, that they'll probably even say a lot like it did with the Spanish flu, when we predict that so many more died. I believe it will definitely be in history books. People were looking for something to be a part of. And there were so many people who were out of work. And they knew that they wanted to do something. They weren't healthcare workers. They weren't social workers. But they knew that what they saw, that is not what that's not what we're about. And we're going to say something about it. So I believe that because of this COVID, we were all just experiencing these things as one huge community.
Like, I'm not sure what the story is in 30 years. Like, I think it might depend on how 2021 goes. Because I feel like everything that's happened is only really meaningful if it results in a change. Only historically meaningful if it results in a change. And if the answer at the end of it all is, and then everybody goes back to what they were doing, then like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all year we've been hearing the word unprecedented. It's the first time really in living memory that we've had a pandemic. There are a few people who remember the last one, but with all of the political unrest, the pandemic, just the chaos of this year, I think it will definitely be remembered for a long time.
I think it is. I think it has, because of how much political stuff is involved as well.
I think each month could have its own chapter. I think that they'll have to create an entire course on the year 2020 because there's so much to cover.
It'll make it within a decade. And I think within that decade, there'll be multiple chapters, but you look back of other viruses and plagues that impacted the same number of people that the coronavirus did, it's in the history books. Yeah. But I think if you combine a plague with the racial issues that we've dealt with in the United States specifically, and then you go into what's happened with this election, I feel like if you go back and you look at history books of what they cover illnesses, they cover injustices, and one of the things the U.S. prides himself on is elections. Yeah. So I think one of the big things that will be in the history book is just, in ways, everything you would have thought would have happened, it was opposite.
Right.
But I also think, though, there will be pieces of good things of showing the tech innovations that happened this year, because I think what's happened this year is going to have an impact for a really long time.
Yeah. This year is going in the books for sure.
For sure. Man, I cannot imagine. Especially at the fact of the residual effect that will happen with the kid, like with toddlers right now.
Yeah.
Like somebody explained to me, like, yo, my 2-year-old, half of their life has been quarantined. And some kids from our small group, all they know is like that's society to them.
Do you have any personal regrets about 2020? Maybe something you could have gone out to do but chose not to do, or something that you did do that you wish you hadn't done, anything like that?
You know what? I actually don't think I have any regrets from this past year. When all is said and done, this year wasn't all that bad for me personally. If there's anything I wish that I could have done more of, I suppose I wish I would have taken time to reach out to people who now I look back and I know needed someone to reach out to them, and I didn't. Maybe that'll haunt me.
So I guess not really. I feel like the moments when it really counted, I like broke and just like, there was a funeral and I like went to the funeral, and like I'm glad I did, even though that was a risk.
No, I don't think so. I'm not really the kind of person who looks back and feels regret about things. I generally kind of like, in retrospect, look at things and let them be what they are and say, all right, this is good or this is bad, and this is how I'm going to change that in the future. But no regrets. I think everything was just a bit of a mess, and there was some good and there was some bad, and it is what it is.
I regret that I wasn't able to attend the funeral of a cousin that passed, or my brother's wedding. I don't regret sticking to our decision to be cautious, but I lament that we weren't able to be there for my cousin's family or celebrate with my brother and his wife. And I feel like 2020 stole those relational moments from us.
I don't actually really have any regrets of 2020 because I felt like this year it's like there's nothing stopping you from doing what you feel is important.
Right.
And no excuses. And so even though I didn't take every day to do the absolute most, I know that I did my best in most occasions. So 2020, as far as me, I'm pretty proud of myself.
How close has COVID gotten to you?
So Rebecca has a family member who was on a ventilator right now. He's very, very sick. So that is pretty close. There have been some family friends of Rebecca's who have passed away. It's been really, really interesting because back in March, like I didn't know anyone who even had tested positive. And then come June, it was like, hey, I heard that Cheryl's cousin's dog had it. You know, it was like this, it was just disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right to ask this because for me, at least, as the year progressed, it got closer and closer and closer and closer and closer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to keep getting closer.
About 2 degrees of separation. There are some extended family members who have gotten it, no one that we would have been in contact with, but people that maybe my parents would have seen or Dan's parents would have seen. So no one super close to us has gotten it, but there have been times where we've needed to ask people to quarantine a little bit longer or get tested before we were able to see them with or without masks.
With the people at work that we just had COVID, it's like there's a few people that are sick, but there's only a couple that have been tested positive. So, and you know, we were just working with people who had a positive test, but they weren't experiencing any of the symptoms. And I know that's a thing about COVID is you can have it and not experience any effects from it.
Well, I would say it's gotten very close to me, partly because of working at the hospital, both like physically, I was interacting with people who had COVID all the time. They didn't know it, but you know, they would come into the hospital and the next day they're tested and they were positive. So, but in the same way, like some of the patients I worked with died from COVID, and there are people that I knew and have worked with for 2 years.
Yeah.
So both like physically in terms of health and emotionally, I was impacted by it. And of course, you know, I feel like at this moment in time, so many people have been impacted by COVID that almost everyone knows someone who has passed away because of it. Yeah. So I think I have gotten close to it. Yeah, for sure.
Ooh, pretty close. In July, I got sick and it wasn't COVID, but I was sick for 2 weeks and I had to get tested and it was scary. And I was alone, so nobody was there to take care of me. I just want to like emphasize I was alone this whole time. And then for clinicals, we had to be around COVID patients all the time. So that was kind of scary to see it firsthand, the effects of what it does to people. Yeah.
What is something you miss about life pre-2020?
You know what? This is hard to measure because I've been a father the entire 2020. So I was already expecting this year to have to say goodbye to things. But John, you know me. Like when we went to school together, you know how social I am. I like to bounce around. I don't like to stay in one place for too long. I really, really miss conventions. I go to 3 or 4 anime slash just comic book conventions every year, and they've all been canceled. I was able to go to one in January of this year, but that was like before BC, before COVID. But to be honest, I would just be happy to feel like I can walk into a bar with my friends or just go to a restaurant and get sushi again.
I miss novelty. As I mentioned previously, we really don't leave our house a whole lot. I don't, at least. And so nothing new ever really happens unless it's something tragic in the news. And that's not the good kind of novelty. I just miss, going into a store and running into somebody, or going to a restaurant I've never been to before, or people meeting my baby for the first time, because that has happened very rarely this year. So just new experiences, and there's been a lot of monotony in 2020.
Traveling.
Yeah, you already kind of said that part.
Yeah. And not getting to hug people. It's you and Katie had taught me that hugs are a good thing. So yeah, that's been something that I've missed doing, and it's hard at like my father-in-law's funeral. People, you want to hug, and people want to hug you, and going through those moments in life where you just are needing some comfort and can't get it in that way.
Right.
I'm looking forward to getting back to getting to hug people.
I think I miss like the ease in which you could engage with the world. You could leave your home and go places and interact with people, and you didn't have to think about it. And I think as humans, that was like kind of just how we naturally navigate anything. Yeah. I mean, we have like a natural rhythm and movement with how we navigate people and places and things. And now it just requires a lot more forethought and energy. And there is like a level of fear all people have, like a baseline. I mean, it's not like you're walking around thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. But you have to be a lot more cautious. And it's difficult. It just is draining.
Yeah.
So I miss like kind of that, like, I don't want to say reckless, but maybe reckless engagement with the world where you could just like be, and it was fine.
The things I've missed the most though have been our daughter's concerts, the orchestra concerts and the plays. Especially for our oldest daughter, because this is her senior year of high school.
Breweries.
What is it?
Breweries.
That's
one of our biggest outings down here. We have a lot of those. I think pre-2020, I just miss like being able to go out and hang out with people.
Oh, I miss going to Mexican restaurants and drinking a giant margarita.
Yeah. We have our favorite one, Juanita's. Oh,
it was like we had just gotten to a point, I feel like, where we were like regulars there.
Mm-hmm. Being able just to see the life that's going on, and the excitement of all that. Yeah, it really cuts me up, the fact that like just that connection, that like being able to meet a stranger and like play a game of pool at your favorite bar spot, and just like getting to know a story, like just being able to be outside of your own experience.
And finally, what does the number 1.75 million mean to you?
Now I'm worried. Is this the count of the dead?
Yeah.
Jesus. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's so many people, and it's so sad, and it's so sad how people have been like qualifying it. Like it's like, oh, it doesn't count because they were old or they were sick or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I don't think that really matters. Um, so it's just very sad. That's all I can really say.
Yeah.
It's like not something you can like grasp.
Yeah.
Too big.
What does the number 1.75 million mean to you?
Heartbreaking, preventable. I think it's really hard not to get angry when you hear those numbers, because there are so many things that we could have done as a society to keep that number much lower. And the fact that I don't want to be divisive or point fingers, but I don't think it's enough to say that it's really sad to hear that number. I think to an extent we do need to be angry because so many people died who didn't need to. And that's going to weigh on me for a long time.
Yeah. Last one. What does the number 1.79 million mean to you?
A lot. That's a lot. That is the number of COVID infections, right?
That's the total number of global deaths by COVID.
So that is global deaths. Wow. Well, today I was actually just thinking about this. For a while, actually, I really just pondered this, and I was thinking. So that's around the number of infections we've had how many infections have we had in the United States?
I don't have that number on me.
Okay, I know that we've had a lot.
Yeah.
It's more than 1 point. I know it's more than 1 million. But I'm just thinking about the 335,000 number that just came out.
Yeah.
Today, and that number keeps climbing. It's going to keep getting bigger. I think of the least of these. Look, when Jesus said, "Whatever you have done for the least of these, you have done unto me." And I think about how homelessness, true homelessness, only impacts, like 0.2% of the U.S. population, but we say that's a problem.
Right.
There are like 400,000 kids in foster care. Only 100,000 or so are on the actual list to be like adopted, but we say that's a problem. So why is not millions of infections of a novel disease and over 300,000 deaths of people who weren't going to die this year? They weren't going to die this year. Sure, maybe some of them, but they weren't going to die this year. That's how I see it. They weren't going to die. They weren't supposed to die this year. It wasn't going to happen, and it happened.
Yeah.
And then I see, go
ahead.
Get ready. Then I see people who use the name of Jesus talk about Jesus, talk about how they can't wait to get back to church because they want to worship Jesus. Yet they deny doing the simplest things to keep others safe. That they don't understand that the least of these is not intended to mean, those who we find it convenient to help, those who we find it feel good to help. Because, when you go to a homeless shelter and you hand someone a meal, You can smile at them and say, God bless you, here's a hot meal.
Mhm.
Or you buy a present for just a child in foster care. Oh, it makes me feel so good. I got a picture of a person who I bought a gift for. But being told we want you to stay away from your family and we want you to wear a mask if you do, that all of a sudden becomes I cannot believe you told me to do this. My freedoms are being infringed, when you staying away from your family probably has more of a global impact than handing a child a gift, which is a wonderful thing to do. I don't want to diminish that. But I do not believe that you can say that you care for the least of these, because that number is still just a fraction of the global population. But that is still 1.7 million people, right?
Yeah.
Weren't supposed to die this year. And we can't say we care for the least of these if we are not even willing to do the simplest things to make sure that people can be kept safe. So 1.7 million is a lot.
Yeah.
335,000 people in the United States. Because again, that's a number that I can kind of get down to, because it's like, wow, but when you start talking about when you put an M in the number, it's like, holy cow, like this is ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And I do not believe that a person can say that they are a follower of Jesus if they do not care for the least of these, and they are no different from the Pharisees who are only seeking to care for themselves. And that's what that number means to me. It means that there are 1.7 million people who weren't supposed to die this year that did, because this virus came seemingly like it just showed up one day, and we didn't do enough to keep people safe. And I say we as a community, because I haven't been perfect either.
Right.
We have not done enough to keep others safe. And I really like these questions you've asked, because they've helped us get down to the personal side of this year.
Mm-hmm.
But this one here, it really gets down to a really big understanding of just how big this thing is. And how these people weren't supposed to die.
Yeah.
And that if we say that we truly care for the least of these, the least of these are the ones who have died. The ones whose deaths could have been prevented. And I've almost gotten tired of saying it, because it's like a tired phrase. Wear a mask has become a tired household phrase. Oh yeah, I know. But no, it's that simple. Stay 6 feet apart. And now we're asking people to make a little small sacrifice. Have a Zoom New Year's party. Zoom your Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just make a little sacrifice to ensure that someone who is vulnerable does not get sick. Because it can just be on your hand, and then you touch a can of soup in the grocery store and it's being passed. It can be when you just take off your mask just for a second to scratch your nose or to wipe your mouth. Do whatever we can to keep others safe.
What does the number 1.8 million mean to you?
It's a lot of something. I wasn't completely sure when I saw that what that 1.8 was.
So that's the total global deaths connected to COVID.
Okay. That's what I thought it might be, but I wasn't sure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to, I don't know. For me, there's so much info that, as being somebody who sometimes analyzes data,
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of things were connected to COVID that weren't actually like maybe the cause of COVID, or like I look at the deaths and how many of those were actually the cause of COVID. That number, that number doesn't surprise me, I guess I should say.
Okay.
But yeah, it stinks to think about all the people who did lose their young ones or their middle. I guess it's been a full spectrum of age, and so it just sucks. It sucks
It
to
does.
have people lose that many people because of one thing. But I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to cut down on that. And of course, there's always places for improvement, always room for improvement. But yeah, I don't know.
What does the number 1.84 million mean to you?
I mean, that number is totally just conceptual to me. Like, I have no concept really for like what that number means. But when you ask that, I of course think, is this like the number of people who were impacted or died from COVID? In which case, like when I'm trying to understand large scale numbers like that, I'm always trying to like create some sort of imagery or metaphor for myself. And I'm thinking like, I live in Columbus, there are 900,000 people here. If 1.8 million is the number of people who have died from COVID, then my entire city would be gone. And how would that like look and feel? And that's a very, very large number. And it's eerie, like thinking about that. It's very, very large.
But yeah, you're right. It's the total global deaths for COVID.
Yeah. And that's, I think, because it's a global number and it's spread out, people are a little bit desensitized to that number because you don't see the effects in such a strong way. But again, if you like think of it in terms of like the number of people where I live,
right,
or like your entire family, something like that, it becomes a lot more personal.
What does the number 1.87 million mean to you?
That's a lot. Like, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot. And it's a lot of people who is, has the risk of dying. And I think that's where I always, oh my gosh, if I get emotional, I'm sorry. Like, I always think about my parents, right? Like, that could, my parents could be one of the, two of those numbers. And we don't think about it because I think, maybe we don't know people who have gotten the COVID, but it's definitely real. And especially when you go to hospitals. We had one patient who showed up, and I mean, he was old, like probably around the age of my parents. They're like 60, 64, around that age. And like his wife is also old, so she can't come visit. And he had really bad respiratory issues with COVID. And all he like, we would go and talk to him. He just wanted to see his wife. And we don't think about it because it doesn't really affect us, especially young people. Like, I've traveled between Philly and Virginia, and even then, like, it's always in the back of my head, and like, I'm going to go see my parents. There's a good chance they could get it from me. And I just think that that's a huge number to like mess with,
right?
So yeah, that's what I think about it. It really freaks me out sometimes. I try not to look at the numbers. That's one thing that I told myself by like June happened. I figured it's going to keep going up, and I don't want to look at it and give myself anxiety. So yeah, I don't look at it.
Gotta protect your own emotional and mental state somehow.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, my dad, he is definitely like more concerned out of everybody. And, he's a very healthy person, but he's very afraid of getting sick. And to him, like, he checks the numbers all the time. And he'll always call me. He's like, Vinny, it's going up. It's going up. What do you think we should do? Like, to them, even the vaccines are not even going to come to them because they're going through phases. So it's going to be a while before they get vaccinated. So, it's scary.
It is.
But I mean, it's good that the vaccine's out. So I'm hoping at least, 60% of the population takes it so it can be effective.
Right.
So, yeah.
There's always that hope, but
I'm like, and this is like a personal story about my dad. So the reason why he lost his hearing was because of polio.
Right.
And America had the polio vaccine at that point, but India didn't. And he got a different strain of the polio, which caused him to lose his hair cells that transport the waves to like convert sound. So he lost all that because he couldn't get the polio vaccine. So to him, it means a lot. And the thing is, we have all these vaccines, all this technology that we can use. And when people say they're not going to vaccinate their kids or, themselves, it just drives me nuts. Yeah. It's like, there are people around the world that would die to get it. And we have this opportunity to go receive the vaccine and you won't do it for no reason.
Right. What does the number 1.9 million mean to you?
So, two things. Number one, failure of governments to care for their citizens the way that I believe that God ordains them to do. Failure of citizens to love their neighbor in the most simplistic and basic way by just being careful for their own health and safety. Yeah. But also heartbreak. The heartbreak of every person in the world whose lives have been permanently changed because they lost someone that they love. Yeah.
All right. And Ryan, last question here. What does the number 1.9 million mean to you?
It's a really big number. And I think, especially with all the numbers we've heard this year, I think for me, I connect numbers right now with loss. How much, millions are we losing financially in local businesses? We've dealt with, I intentionally did not look it up. I know there's a significance to that number. And I didn't want to have the exact answer, but I also know, like, if you count, I'm guessing the whole pandemic and COVID number we're probably getting close to that number. In some way would be my guess of that connection. And I think we underestimate it. And I think one thing I like to do with 1.2 is to really show people that number is to write it fully out. Yeah. Or look up, it sounds weird, but look up 1.8 million dots.
Right.
Or help to really signify what that number is. Because I think when we think in the world now where you have billionaires and trillions of money and, we often lose the significance of 1.8 million. It's significant, no matter what that's representing. I mean, if you told me I was going to get $1.8 million tomorrow, fantastic. We've lost 1.8 million people this year. I think it, from the joys of that number to the sadness of that number, is a full.
Yeah.
So are you going to let me know what that number means?
Do you want to know?
I do want to know.
That is the total number of COVID-related deaths globally.
That's unheard of. I mean, you think of, I think people downplay it a lot of like, well, the world has that many deaths anyways each year, but I think it's astonishing of that's one cause.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I wonder if you have the same thoughts of if globally we would have come together sooner. Mm-hmm. To work together and not competing with our different medical pharmaceutical companies of, well, we want to be the first nation to come up with a vaccine.
Right.
Would that number be different? And I don't think we'll ever know. There's no way to ever know that of, could that number have been less if we would have been more focused on the world and not ourselves?
Yeah. What does the number 1.94 million mean to you?
That means, all right, in a very literal sense, it is heartbreaking. It is like, because I'm trying to fathom that number.
Yeah.
And the reason why it exists. Because, you know, they say a failed administration, like, yeah, that's true, but what it really is, that is heartbreaking. That it something that was known, something that could be addressed, something that could have been slowed down, and it wasn't. Because it's so, it feels very unfair. Like when there are resources to help stop those things that are going on,
right?
It's heartbreaking to think that it wasn't, because, you know, people want it to be reckless, and not the people who got it necessarily, but like, because people don't want to be concerned about wearing a piece of cloth on their face, and leaders not being able to make a statement to say, no, this is what you're going to do. Fear of ruffling feathers. And that is very heartbreaking and irritating, because it's like, those aren't just numbers. It's not just a story. This is real life, real people, real lives that will not come back.
Yeah.
Devastating.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel pretty much the same. It's just really, really sad. Yeah. Very sobering for sure.
Definitely.
Ugh.
I roll up to the grocery store and I wait in line. I hand sanitize. I'm looking at all these people and I'm sure that they are fine. I hand sanitize. I finally get inside and I grab my grocery cart. I hand sanitize. I'm trying not to think about all the hands that have touched it. I hand sanitize. I look around and I see germs everywhere. I'm getting pretty scared. I hand sanitize. I look to the left, to the right. I'm feeling fight or flight. I hand sanitize. I don't know if I'm gonna make it to the end of the store. I hand sanitize. Honestly, now I can't remember